Great. So thank you everybody for joining today. My name is Dicckson and I'll be your trainer for HL7 and Mirth Connect. Little introduction about myself. I work as technical architect and lead, and then I'm also training people on HL7 Fire and Mirth Connect for the past 7, 8 years now. So I have experience in specifically into healthcare IT for more than 14 years now. And I have been working on various healthcare standards like HL7, CCD, FHIR, HIE, and so on. And I also have experience working with various integration engines. As of now, I am working on Mirth predominantly, but in the past, I did work on Rhapsody, Integration Buddy, Connector, little bit on Ensemble. And I've been training resources and from past 7 to 8 years, as I mentioned earlier. So that's very quick introduction about myself. So today is the first session of our new batch that we are planning to start. And in today's session, we'll cover um first the basics of what is a hospital workflow, what is integration engine, and what is HL7 interface, and so on. And then we will, at the end of the session, we'll talk about administrative related aspects of this training, how many days it's going to be, and at what time it would be every day. And we will also take up any questions that we have. So by the end of today's session, we'll talk about where do we hear this term called HL7. We will also take a dive into hospital workflow from a general workflow perspective. Then we'll talk about what is HL7. We'll see what is an interface. We'll also talk about why the name HL7 as, or why do we need HL7, and then we'll talk about how the name HL7 has come into play. We'll also talk about what is an interface and what is the role of HL7 in interfaces. We'll also talk about what is an interoperability, and then finally we'll take a look at HL7 message structure before closing today's session. So before jumping into various aspects of hospital workflow, there are a few technical terms that we need to understand, or I would say acronyms that we need to understand, because we'll be using these acronyms down the line a lot. First, to begin with, PM or PMS, it is a practice management system. It is a software that is used by doctors, software used by the receptionists, and they would use this to store patient information or save patient information and also schedule appointments and also to schedule many other aspects or manage many other aspects within the hospital or a clinic. And second is EHR. EHR stands for electronic health record, and this is basically used for storing clinical data, and this is used by doctors and nurses to to capture digital information or clinical information of the patient. And then we have HIS. HIS is Hospital Information System. This is a combined console of both PM, EHR, and LIS. So you don't need to have, or you don't need to worry about having two different applications. HIS is a one single application having everything from registration to managing or holding clinical data and all. And then you have LIS, which is Lab Information System. Again, this is an app that is specifically used by the labs so that they can receive orders and generate results and send the results electronically back to the hospital systems. Then we have ICD and CPT. These two are terms that are used to, apparently, these are libraries, and these are used to go ahead and represent various kinds of diseases that the patient has. That's the reason it is called as International Classification of Diseases. And then you have CPT, which is current procedural terminology. This is a process uh, or these are list of procedure codes that are used by doctors to represent what procedures they performed on patients. Then you have CCD, which is a document basically used to represent the entire summary of patients' stay in the hospital. And then HIE is a concept of how you exchange documents between two different hospitals. which is Health Information Exchange. And then IHE Integrating Health Enterprise is another standard like HL7 V2 and FHIR that is used for exchanging CCD documents through HI. So last three terms are used in the last session where we talk about other standards in healthcare, but other terminologies like PME, HR are most frequently used throughout our training. So let's look at hospital workflow. I think most of us will be familiar with this. We know what happens when we go to the hospital, but let's run quickly through the workflow because hospital workflow is going to be the blueprint for us down the line throughout the entire training. Many other times we'll come back to the hospital workflow to see which trigger event or which specific event we are going to talk about whenever we are talking through any of the message types in HL7. So let's see what happens here. So to begin with, a patient walks in and the patient will go ahead and meet the receptionist. And at the receptionist desk, they would say uh, they want to meet so and so doctor, or they want to meet um, any of the any certain specialty, if not doctor specifically that they know, right? So they would go ahead and check with the receptionist who is available, or if they want specific doctor, they will ask for them. Receptionist would immediately ask whether they are coming to the hospital for the first time or they have registered uh, earlier. So based on that, apparently receptionist will take a call to register the patient record. They will capture into demographic details if the patient is visiting for the first time. Let's assume that patient is visiting for the first time. They will capture the entire demographic detail of the patient. And this demographic information will be sent to the application that is stored by that is used by the doctors, which is the HR application. Okay. And then after creating the patient record, the receptionist would go ahead and create the appointment for that specific patient so that doctor can get notified that there is a patient who is going to come in or who is already in the hospital to uh, get uh, get the checkup done, right? Once that is done, doctor would receive the appointment notification and he'll be ready to see the patient. And once the patient enters the doctor's room, their patient and doctor are going to discuss about the problem that they had, right? And this specific scenario is called as an encounter. So encounter is a term that you will be hearing a lot when you are working in healthcare. This encounter is going to represent the fact that doctor and patient are discussing their problems and the documentation would begin from there. And whatever happens from that point onwards will be registered or will be stored under that encounter. So that encounter is a very, very important term and most frequently used um, for storing the clinical information. And then during this process, doctor will try to go ahead and diagnose the patient disease. He will try to see or try to assess the situation of the patient. If he is able to go ahead and assess the situation just by looking or checking the symptoms of the patient, that would be great. But usually that's not the case, right? We all know that in most of the scenarios, they would recommend to go for a simple CBC test or a urine culture or any other test which they feel that would be necessary in order to go ahead and conclude on what disease patient has, right? So what they will do is they will immediately go ahead and place a lab order, and this lab order will be received by the labs. Labs will perform the test, and they will try to go ahead and generate the results for after collecting the samples from the patient, and they will send these results back to the provider. Provider is nothing but the doctor. Now, once the doctor receives the labs, he will go ahead and try to prescribe medicine, and he will ensure that the patient is able to, I mean, patient will receive the medicine and then After that, patient will go ahead and meet the receptionist. All the charges pertaining to whatever service patient has taken. It could be the charges with respect to the doctor, to charges with respect to the labs. Everything will be sent back to the receptionist desk so that receptionist can compile them together, generate a claim if patient has an insurance, or submit the bill to the patient so that patient can pay the bill and then leave the hospital. So this is the high level workflow of what happens in hospital, and we are just talking about a scenario of an outpatient, right? We have other scenarios like emergency visit. We have scenarios like inpatient, where the patient is getting admitted to the hospital, and there will be much more. I mean, those events or those situations will have much more data points where which will be captured and saved within the system. So as of now, we just looked at an outpatient visit so that we can understand the workflow. Down the line, this will be useful for us to relate back whenever we are going through various message events, as I said earlier. Now let's look at the problem. Now we know that there is a PM system which is storing the data. We also know that there is an EHR system where patients' clinical data is being stored. When we talk about a software application, there are two main components, apparently three, but for now, let's say that there are only two. One is the front end, which is used by the user. When I say front end, it's the user interface application where the user is going to search for the patient or schedule appointments and so on. And then they have the backend database where the actual data is stored, right? Similarly, you have electronic health record application, which is used by doctors, and it has its own database. Then we also talked about sending a lab order. So we will also have lab, and lab has its own database to store the data that it is receiving. Now, the problem here is when we have to exchange the data between these two applications. Now, in our previous slides, we saw that when the patient information got registered, which we call demographics, that demographics is sent from PM system to EHR system, and an appointment created is sent from PM to EHR. When doctor places an order, it is sent from EHR to lab. But how is this being sent, right? So there is definitely a data exchange that is happening. There is whenever patient is created, that information is sent over to EHR. That's how EHR is able to get the notifications or view the patient appointment or patient demographic related data within the EHR application, even though the patient is registered in PM system, right? So when this particular situation should happen, where the data should go from PM to EHR, there is a huge challenge. Let's say, let me give you a metaphor to understand this better. Let's say um, we have two, three different people from different countries. They are talking to each other, and one is from US, one is from India, and the other one is from China. And these people, if they have to communicate with each other, in the earlier days, let's say that there is no common medium of communication. So if the US guy has to talk to Chinese guy, maybe he has to learn Chinese and vice versa. If it is just with one person from one country, then that is still understandable. They can try to learn and they can talk. But if they have to communicate with 10 different people from 10 different countries, that becomes very difficult, right? Similarly, when these applications have to exchange the data, each application's database is different from the other. PM systems database architecture, database design, the way it stores the data is totally different from the data that is stored in EHR. So whenever a patient is getting registered in the PM system, the requirement is for this data to be sent from PM to EHR, or else doctor will not be able to see the patient information or get the appointment notification and so on. Right? So there is definitely a need that communication should happen between PM and EHR, but the database designs, database architectures are different, like the way languages are different between two different countries. So English emerged as common medium of communication, and people started talking in English and converse in English. In the similar way, we needed a common medium or common language between these two applications, which can exchange the data in a very common way. Why did we need it? Let's say uh, PM system has its own architecture, right? So there will be an engineer who will try to, who may be from PM system side, and he is aware of PM's architecture. He knows the database tables where the data is stored and all. Now he has to send the data from PM to EHR. He has to have a deeper study and thorough study of database that is on the EHR side. Understand where the data should be stored for patient demographics, where the data should be stored for patient appointments, and so on. And this is a very time consuming process. Let's say even though there are two different engineers involved, there is an engineer, data engineer on PM side, data engineer on the EHR side. They're talking to each other. They have to discuss on what is the data format that we have to exchange. Where do we need to send what kind of data, right? All of that discussion will come into play. And this process was really consuming huge time to implement one single interface or develop one single tunnel between PM and EHR to send out data, right? That's where HL7 has come into play for rescue. So HL7, like the English language, is a common standard or common medium of communication between PM system to EHR, EHR to lab, and so on. So what this does is it is going to tell you uh, what data format you have to use. It will tell you where do you need to send what kind of data. Let's say, for example, I have patient demographic information. Where do I send it? It will standardize that. So it is not a language. I'm saying that language for now, but it is a messaging standard which will actually help you to exchange the data between two applications in the form of HL7 messages. So how is that helpful? Now, when patient information has to be sent from PM to HR, PM guy doesn't need to bother about what is happening on the other side, or he doesn't need to study database on the HR side or understand the database. All that he has to do is he has to go ahead and generate the HL7 message and send it out. As it is deemed that all the implementers will understand HL7, as soon as HL7 message is received on the HR side, the data engineer on the HR side will go ahead and consume that HL7 message and write it to the database. Because this messaging format or language is understood by everyone, whoever is in the implementation. So they don't need to spend time in discussing what format we have to send the data in, where do we need to send what kind of data, and all. So if they are able to generate ADT, let's say demographic message, then he should be able to interpret that. This is one advantage. Second advantage is that developing interfaces HL7 is very quick, as it is a standard. Everyone can understand it. As it can be understood by everyone, you can go ahead and send the same demographic message to the lab as well if required. You don't need to explicitly have discussion again in terms of what format we have to send, where do we need to send what kind of data, and all. And you can send the same HL7 message that you generated for EHR to the lab as well. So that cuts down a lot of time, right? So earlier to implement one interface, it used to take maybe 10 months or 1 year. But now with this, within 4 to 6 weeks, you can develop the interfaces, test them, and then take them to production. Okay, so now let us see what is an interface. So interface is nothing but you can call it as a bridge or a tunnel, which is actually helping you to exchange the data between two different applications. And HL7 is the messaging protocol or messaging standard that we are going to exchange, or that we are going to send from one system to the other through this interface. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of database you are using, because you are not pulling the data from database I mean, you're not working at the database level, but you're working at an application level. What is that application level? We will understand in the upcoming slide. But apparently, at a high level, you there will be an integration engine or some sort of program which is going to extract data from database, construct HL7 message, and then send it. As the database um, are not directly involved, it doesn't matter which kind of database you are dealing with. But at the end of the day, this interface will help you to go ahead and exchange the data from PM to EHR application. So what is HL7 in a nutshell? It is a messaging language or messaging standard, and it will help you to go ahead and exchange the data between two different applications, especially medical applications. And this is totally dedicated for healthcare data exchange standard. And it is based on the fact that we have open systems interconnection model. The name comes from there. We will see that in the next slide. And then HL7 is being used in more than 28 countries today. Apparently, the number might have increased even more from the day that I made this slide. And then now let us talk about why did we end up in having this name called HL7. So if you look at the OSI model, so I'm not sure how many of aware of OSI model. It's a beautiful model. If you're not aware, then I would highly recommend going through it and understanding it. Uh, but apparently, this model is the one which is actually helping us to exchange the packets or exchange the data between two applications, and then we are able to see the data. For example, let's take our scenario itself. I am presenting something on my screen, and you are able to see it on your screen. That is happening because the data that I am presenting is being converted to physical packets. It is traveling through the internet and then reaching your system, and it is reverse interpreted so that the same can be shown on your system, right? So how is that happening? You whatever you are seeing is the OSI layers, and the topmost layer is the application layer. So the presentation that you're seeing on your screen, or the screen that you're seeing, is the application layer, and behind the scenes you can assume that there are seven more layers behind it. Okay, presentation layer, session layer, and the last layer that you're seeing is the physical layer. Okay, so this physical layer is apparently connected to your Ethernet cable or to your Wi-Fi card, and from there it will go ahead and apparently send the packets. So whatever I am presenting is here. It will be converted into packets and it will be sent through the physical layer to out from my system, and it will reach your system's physical layer, and from there it will be reverse interpreted and it will be presented in your application layer. Okay, how is that happening? There is some sort of action that takes place at every layer, but this is a very nice concept, and if you go deeper, it is really nice to understand how things happen behind the scenes. But the most important thing here is that whenever we are working with HL7 messages, we are working at the application layer, which is the seventh layer. So there are a total of seven layers here. This is the first layer, and then this is the seventh layer. So that is the reason why we have this number seven representing level seven. As we are dealing with healthcare data, we call it as health level seven. Okay, that's how we ended up in having this name called HL7. So HL7, like any other language, it has its own grammatical syntaxes. We'll talk about, or we'll look at the syntaxes in the next slide. And HL7 is an organization and it takes care of this HL7 standard called version 2, Fire, and so on. HL7 version 2 has around 12 chapters and 5 appendices. HL7 chapter 2.3 is very famous. That's one of the standard normative version that was released back in 1997. And there are more than 50 data types. We have more than 80 message types, and we have more than 86 event types. So you may not be much familiar with what these data types, message types, and event types are. If you're hearing about HL7 for the first time, we'll get to know about this once we complete tomorrow's session. So let's talk about a little bit history of HL7. So now that we understood that HL7 is a messaging standard or a messaging language that is used to exchange data between two different applications, let's see where it started. So back in 1980s, late 1980s, as I said, the problem arose to exchange the data. It was taking a lot of time. There was no specific standardization of how we can exchange the data. That's when HL7v2 started. An official release was made in 1997, 2.3, and then later we had another version of 2.3.1, a minor patch release of in 1999. And then you have other versions released, 2.4, 2.5, and then a major release was done in version 3, which is in 2005. So 2005, once the version was released, there was very less attraction towards v3.0. And you may be wondering that after 2.3, we again started having, sorry, after 3.0, we again started having 2.8 releases. So usually that doesn't happen, right? Whenever we are releasing any version, we release in an incremental order and we don't go back. We just add to the last version and keep increasing that version. But as you can see here, 3 was released in 2005, and later there were version 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, and so on, and that was released in 2014. So why did that happen? What is the problem with version 3? Apparently, version 3 is a complete reframing of the message structure that we use in 2.0, 2.x. The 2.x uses pipe delimited messages. However, 3 is complete revamp of the entire structure of the HL7 messaging standard, and that was very difficult to be accepted by the industry. Not difficult, I would say. The standard it was a little complicated, and then it was not as easy as version 2. That is one thing. Second thing is, which is one of the most important thing, is what I feel is addition of value. Usually we upgrade from one app to another, one version to another, because we get some value out of it, right? Uh, because of adding some additional features. Similarly, when people were moving from HL7 V2 to V3, there was no significant value addition. Not in terms of functionality. There are a lot of value additions in terms of technical aspects behind the scenes, but from functional perspective, let's say that we have a demographic interface, which is being sent from PM to HR, and version 3 was actually doing the same thing. There is no much difference. So that's the reason people did not think of spending money and migrating where there is no significant value addition. Right? That is also one of the reason it did not get a lot of traction, and slowly it faded away. So people did not learn much about V3, and expertise on learning V3 was also very less. And I mean, people who know about V3 were very, very less. Implementation cost was very high, no significant value addition. That's the reason V3 was not very much welcomed by the industry. And so HL7 also decided to continue to accommodate HL7 V2 itself, and have added all the improvements that are needed to improve HL7 V2 so that it can keep catering the needs of current HL7 standards. And after that came Fire. Fire came in 2010. I mean, it started in 2010. There are many reasons why Fire has been started. HL7 was not much supporting various industry needs that were there. Uh, so Fire came in to solve that specific problem. So Fire as a standard is the latest standard, and it is not like HL7 V2. It is not like HL7 V3. It is completely based on REST API model, and it supports in lot of aspects like developing mobile apps, exchanging data through APIs, and so on. Right? So many ask me a question whether Fire will replace HL7 V2. Uh, there are paradigms in HL7 Fire where which aim to replace HL7 V2, but Fire itself is evolving. Fire itself is evolving a lot, and it is not completely evolved. There will be a lot of breaking changes in Fire with the future versions. So uh, as long as I mean, it will take at least another 5 to 7 years for Fire to say that okay, this is completely matured. So until that point, Fire and HL7 V2 will coexist, and people at that point also may not tend to migrate from HL7 V2 to Fire so easily because of the same points that we have discussed earlier with V3. Unless there is a significant value addition, moving from HL7 V2 to fire is not going to happen so soon. So both will coexist for a very long time. The actual purpose of HL7 V2 and HL7 fire are also little different from business perspective. Though fire has the methodologies to replace HL7 V2, but that will take time. And new implementations might start with fire. Old implementations will still be retained on V2. A good example is that even the countries that we see today who are just about to begin their digital journey in healthcare, they do go with HL7 V2 itself for hospital related transactions and all. So V2 is still prevalent and will be prevalent for a good amount of time. So what are the advantages of HL7? So it will help us to share the medical data, demographic data, billing data, and so on. And it will data will be transferred in the form of messages. You do not need any special required tools if your application is supporting generation of HL7 messages. If not, then you will have to just have one integration engine which can do that work for you. Code is in the ASCII format, which means it is human readable. When you look at an HL7 V2 message, even though you don't understand the structure, you're looking it for the first time, you will still be able to make out few data points from that just by looking at the message. Then you have HL7 V2 message can work on any OS because we are working at the application layer, which is present in all the different operating systems that we have. So it can connect from any system to any system, like the way it is not dependent on OS. Uh, it can, as it is a data message that can be transacted, it can connect from any system to any system using any protocol. You can use TCP/IP, SFTP, REST API, file reader, file writer, and so on. Next, what we have is why do we need these standards? Apparently, that will help us to share medical data with share the medical data, and also as we have these standards, the insurance claims will be quicker because you can generate them quickly and send it quickly because you will get the data on time. And then apps can talk to each other because of these standards now, meaning they can exchange the data, and greater safety for the patient because there is less human intervention, which means less scope of committing the errors. And that increases the quality of the data that we are going to store and exchange. And at the end of the day, it will add a lot of quality for uh, data storage of healthcare data. So now let us talk about how HL7 messaging works, right? How HL7, what is the basis of these HL7 messages? So this standard is written from a perspective that there are events, series of events that are happening in the healthcare world. For example, when we spoke about hospital workflow, I told you that patient would walk in, patient would share his demographic information, receptionist would go ahead and create that patient record. So that is one event, right? So this event is concluded. Once the event data is saved, immediately this data should be sent from PM system to EHR system so that patient details are present both in PM and EHR, and doctor can look at all the patient demographic details. This event is called as a trigger event. Okay, why is it called as a trigger event? Because it is demanding the data to be sent from one system to another. So whenever we encounter such kind of event where the data should be sent from one system to another, such events are called as trigger events. Okay, so HL7 works based on those trigger events. Patient getting admitted to hospital is a trigger event. And then an observation being created where or requested where doctor is placing an order for CVC. Then the order should go from EHR to lab. So that is also another event, right? So these are the events. There will be many other events as well. which may not be trigger events. Okay, we'll talk more about those events in tomorrow's session. Next, what we have is we can see that within hospital there are many different categories of work that will be executed. Registration is one category, appointment scheduling is one category, labs, pharmacy, invoices. So these are different verticals that are present within the hospital workflow. And each one of these will have their own events. For example, if we talk about registration itself, as I said earlier, we have patient registration, which is one event. Updating of existing information of the patient, like let's say patient comes in and says that I want to change my phone number or email address. So that is also one kind of event, right? Now let us talk about HL7 message structure. So any questions so far? I'll pause it here for a second.
Hi, actually, I have a question to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Prasad.
Yes,
Yeah,
my
go
name
ahead.
is Prasanna. Sorry, I mistakenly mentioned that name. I just need to update
Okay,
that one.
Prasanna, go ahead. And that's what I was wondering how to pronounce that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, I just need to confirm that I just heard about there multiple languages are using
Mm-hmm.
to execute the HL7 like Java query, C++ program.
Mm-hmm.
So I just need to know brief about those things.
Sure. So HL7 message is a messaging standard. So it's a pipe delimited file that you have to generate. And
Okay.
when you want to generate this data by extracting data from database, you can apparently use any programming language. You can use Java, JavaScript, Python. You can use C, C++. You can use any one of them. So it depends on what kind of integration tool you are using. There are many integration engines in the market, and there are many integration engines in the market, and they use various languages. For example, if you talk about Mirth, you use JavaScript in Mirth, and if you talk about Rhapsody, you can use JavaScript there as well. Mostly JavaScript is used, but if you want to use core programming and develop everything from scratch, you can do that as well. You can develop some Java program which can do that for you. But as we already have tools out there, people tend to use those existing tools, which will make it easy to generate the HL7 messages from scratch.
Okay.
So
Yes,
for our
thank you
training,
for
we'll be, yeah, Prasanna, go
yes.
ahead. Sorry.
No, no, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So for our training, we'll be using Mirth integration engine. So we'll be using JavaScript a lot to go ahead and do that work in the future sessions.
Okay. Yep, that should be helpful. Okay, thank you for that.
All right. So let's proceed with understanding or taking a look at the structure of the HL7 message. So before understanding the anatomy or structure of the HL7 message, I just wanted to give you a metaphor so that it would be very easy to understand the message structure of an HL7 message. So let's say that we have a rack at home and we organize it very well, right? So let's say that we have three shelves within that rack. Each shelf is dedicated for certain category of material. First shelf is dedicated for clothes. Second shelf is dedicated for books. Third one is also, let's say, dedicated for some other kinds of books, right? So the first shelf is divided into different compartments, and within that we say that first compartment is dedicated for t-shirts, second is for trousers, and third is for shirts. So this way we have organized our rack, and even if you ask anyone at home, they will be able to go ahead and grab. Let's say that I want a t-shirt, and I can ask someone at home. I don't need to explicitly mention and tell them that okay, go to first rack, first shelf, and then from the first compartment pick up the t-shirt. You just need to tell them that can you get me the t-shirt? They'll go to the rack and they will go ahead and get the t-shirt from the first shelf, first compartment, because everyone at home understands that position of the t-shirt or where it is stored. We have several scenarios like that at home, right? Let's say we have a dedicated place for storing keys. Even if it is dark, we know that where to pick the candle or the light from, right? So these are dedicated places, and everyone at home are aware of these places. In a very similar manner, HL7 can also be compared to the same scenario where we have dedicated placeholders to store data that we are capturing, right? For example, while registering a patient, you will capture patient name, patient first name, last name, date of birth, gender, patient's SSN probably, and you would also capture patient address information and so on, right? So when we capture all of this data, we also have to transact the data in the HL7 message. So within the HL7 message, there are dedicated placeholders. But even before going to the point about understanding where these placeholders are, we need to understand the structure of the rack, right? Which is nothing but structure of the HL7 message. Let's take a look at that first, and then we'll take a granular look at where we are storing what kind of data. So when we talk about HL7 message, any HL7 message can be divided into multiple segments. Segments are divided into fields. Fields are divided into components. Components are divided into subcomponents. So if we take the example from the previous slide, you can divide it this way. You can call that every HL7 message has multiple segments. Each segment is dedicated to store or dedicated to send some kind of one specific category of data. And each segment is divided into multiple fields, and these fields are further broken down into components. Components are further divided into subcomponents. Okay. Now let us take a look at the grammatical syntaxes that we need to be aware of before looking at the actual HL7 message. So, like every other language, HL7 has its own grammatical syntaxes. Uh, let's say we have full stop, comma, exclamation in English. Similarly, we have few symbols here as well. First one is segment terminator, which is called as carriage return. This is very similar to full stop. At the end of each segment, you will have this carriage return to indicate that this segment has concluded. Next, what we have is field separator. Field separator is like space in English language. Two words are separated with a space, right? Similarly, here within HL7 message, two data points are separated from one another with the help of this pipe. This is called as pipe. And then you have component separator, which is going to separate two components within a field. Okay. We'll talk about subcomponent separator, repetition separator, and escape character as and when we go through or as and when we understand the structure of HL7 message. But these three are very, very important: carriage return, pipe, and caret. Okay. Now let us take a look at the HL7 message. So this is how an HL7 message would look like. As you can see here, every segment is divided from one another, and each segment has its own name. Every segment begins with a three-letter acronym. That three-letter acronym will tell you what kind of data is going to be stored in that particular segment. Similar to the rack that we have seen. First rack was dedicated for clothes. Second rack for is dedicated for books, right? So in the second rack, you will find only books. Similarly, here every segment will hold certain kind of data that is dedicated for that particular data set. So for example, if we talk about this PID, so let me paste this in a notepad so that we can explore it a little more. So here we have our HL7 message. Let me change the language. This is not JavaScripting. This is just normal pipe delimited text file. I set to JavaScript because it will highlight the delimiters, so it will be easy for us to read through. So in this HL7 message, at the end of every segment, you will definitely find a CR. As you can see, there is a space, right? So if you show the in hidden characters, you can see that we can clearly see there is a CR at the end of each segment. Okay, so that CR is nothing but the carriage return, which is nothing but the full stop at the end of every segment. Then we have pipes. So you can see that we have pipes here, and whatever is stored between two pipes is called as a field. So this is a field, this is a field, this is another field, this is another field, this is another field, and so on. All right. So we are looking at the segment called PID. PID stands for patient identification, which means it is going to provide us the entire identity related data for the patient. So this particular segment called PID includes data about patient name, patient date of birth, his gender, his race, his ethnicity, or the address information, or email address information, and so on. Okay. And as I said earlier, segments are divided into fields. So as you can see, one field is separated from another field with the help of this pipe. So this is field number, this is one field, this is another field, this is another field, this is another field, and so on. And each field has its own field positioning. Okay. So this is field number one, this is field number two, this is field number three, field number four, field number five, six is empty, seven again. So we have various fields, and each field has its own field number. Now, from this, if you'll keenly take a look at it, we can understand that this is name of the patient, because we now know that patient PID is patient identification segment. It will have patient related data, and here we have patient name. So if we count which field it is, you can see that it is this is field number one, field number two, three, four, and five. So PID segment, field number five is always dedicated for patient name only. Okay. Then if you see here, this is the patient's date of birth. So if this is five, we can see that this is six and this is seven, right? So PID 7 is dedicated for patient's date of birth, and so on. So there are many other fields. We'll talk about these fields when we begin with taking a look at deeper structure of each of these segments. But the essence here is to help us understand how we can read through the HL7 message. So whenever I want to tell someone where am I sending patient name, I would say I'm sending it in PID5. So if the person on the other side can understand, they will understand that PID is a segment and 5 is the field number. So whenever we want to read through HL7 message, we call out the segment name and then we call out the field number. And that way we'll get to know which kind of field is storing which kind of data. So PID 5 is always used for patient name. PID 7 is used for date of birth. PID 8 is used for gender. PID 11 is used for address, and so on. Okay. Now, who is deciding this? HL7 organization has released V2 and they have already placed all of these placeholders, decided these placeholders, and released the standard. And here we are learning that specific standard itself. And so we cannot go ahead and change the positions. That's what I'm intending to say here. The positions are fixed. All that you need to know is where they are, and you can go ahead and implement the interface if you're receiving HL7 data, and if you know where you have what kind of data, right? So that's about segments and fields. Tomorrow's session, we will talk about uh, components, and we'll also take a little deeper look at repetitions and all, if possible. And then we'll move to message trigger events, what all various kinds of trigger events we have, how do we represent them in HL7 message, and so on. So many things to go with, which we'll continue tomorrow. So now we will go ahead and take a few any questions that anyone has. From training perspective, let me just brief on how it's going to be. So the entire training is divided into two parts. First part would be HL7 V2 messaging. So we'll take a deeper dive into most commonly used events like registration, appointments. We'll talk about how charges are generated and what is the HL7 message that is used. And we'll also talk about orders and results, which is one of the most commonly used interfaces. So we'll take a deeper look into message structure in detail, understand the workflows of each of these message types as well. Okay. And then we have m- mirth, which is our second part of the training. And while we go through mirth, we'll have application workflow so that whoever is very new to mirth can also understand in detail what mirth is. And then we will jump into the technical aspects of how do you develop the interfaces and all. If you haven't received the curriculum, please message or ping Srinivas. He will go ahead and share the curriculum with you, and so that you can get an idea on what is the content that we are going to cover. And secondly, we are going to have these sessions. Training would last for 5 to 6 weeks, and then we are going to have 1 hour session every day at the very same time. So 45 minutes we'll have a session, 15 minutes we'll have questions that we want to take. Okay. And another thing is about if you couldn't make it to the session, don't worry. We are going to record the sessions and upload them to Google Drive, and that Google Drive will be shared with enrolled participants so that they can go ahead and view it at their own time in case if they miss the session. We'll also be creating WhatsApp group for very quick communication so that we can communicate with each other. In case if you guys have any questions, you can immediately go ahead and ask it there, and I will try to respond as soon as I can. Okay, so let's open up for questions. Any questions from anyone?
I have a question.
Yeah, Bharat, go ahead.
Yeah. So you mentioned that we cannot connect to EHR database or PM database. So how does this EHR gets the data? I mean, it generates this RESTful file. How does it work?
RESTful Fire, you mean to say?
Yes.
So you're talking about Fire standard, not HL7 V2.
Yes.
Okay. So every EMR application exposes their data through these endpoints called as Fire endpoints. Using those endpoints, you can go ahead and extract the data from database, and you can also send the data if you want to, depending on what the THR system is allowing you. For example, if you talk about Epic, Epic has its own Fire endpoints for you to go ahead and perform or develop applications if you want to,
Okay.
uh, which you can do through their Fire APIs. So I did not say that you cannot. When I if I said that you cannot connect to the database, I meant you cannot connect directly to the database. There will be alternate mechanisms like Fire APIs or any other APIs. If certain software is not using Fire API, they would prefer to use a normal or a non-standard API as well. So which will enable you to exchange the data with the app with that particular product. But usually they don't tend to provide direct access to the database. Most of the products don't do that.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
No problem. Yeah. Any other questions from anyone else?
Hi, this is Nikita. Actually, we are using
Hey.
Rhapsody Core
Mm-hmm.
Point Engine. Hello.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Nikita.
Yeah, we are using Rhapsody core point engine, so this training will be helpful in understanding in general for me because you are training on Mirth, right?
Absolutely. So, although the integration engines are different, the idea or the logics behind how you develop the interfaces would remain same, right? For example, in Rhapsody, you have this database connectors, file reader connector, and all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, communication points. Similarly, you have connectors in Mirth, which you can use. There you are developing various routes in Rhapsody, but in Mirth Connect, you are going to develop a single channel. You may not have visual representation as you do in Rhapsody, but it is pretty much same on how the data flow happens in Mirth Connect as well. So if you are aware of one integration engine on and or if you are expert on one integration engine, it wouldn't take much time for you to cope up with another integration engine that is out there. It will be very easy because I've been through that journey. Um, that is how I can understand how to work with an integration engine very quickly. So it shouldn't be a big deal.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Dicckson. This
Hey,
is
Ravi. Hi.
Hariprasad.
Hey.
Yeah, do we have any real-time project in this training? Like,
The developments that we are going to perform on Mirth are real-time use cases only. But real-time project that we
okay,
actually use in real time, no, we don't have. The use cases that we have taken for to train you are the real-time use
okay,
cases.
okay.
So we have few questions in chat. Sairam is asking, do we receive any certification at the end of the training? Yes, we'll provide the completion certificate once you are done with the training. And Sai Surya also has the same question. Any project included as part of this training? No real-time project, but use cases that we are going to take a look at is from real-time. Medical coding automation. No, this is not into medical coding, Srikanth. Uh, we are not going to talk anything much or in detail about clinical aspects. Medical coding is mostly into the clinical aspects. So this will not be helpful for you in any way in terms of medical coding automation and all. This is about exchanging data between two different applications, irrespective of what kind of data it is. It can be demographic data, it can be appointment related data, it can be diagnosis data that we want to transact from one system to another, claim data, and so on, but not specifically into medical coding aspects. Okay. Okay, Sairam is asking how could we implement or practice the learning? So we are going to install all the softwares. Everything that we use is open source. So I'll show you how to install Mirth, and I'll also take you through how to connect to the databases, use some real-time use cases like generating HL7 messages from scratch. All right, so when we go through Mirth, we are going to take a deep dive into, we'll start from zero, of course, so that anyone who is new to the app can understand in detail. And then we will slowly increase the level where we are going to build our interfaces. We'll take a look at various kinds of interface building. We'll talk about file reader to file writer. We'll practically see how to build that. We'll also talk about TCP/IP, TCP sender, TCP receiver, and we'll also take a look at how do you develop interfaces from scratch if you are given a database. That's all. If you are given a database, you should be able to generate HL7 message or interpret an HL7 message and write it to the database. So we are going to cover all of those use cases. No sessions on OpenEMR, OpenEHR, Sai Surya. Is it possible to extract only medical disease diagnosis by using HL7 Mirth Connect? Could you elaborate the context, Srikanth? Shrikant, I think you can talk if you are comfortable. You can unmute and talk if that's okay.
Hello, good morning, Dicckson. Yeah.
Hey, Sairam.
With this trainings, since you told we would be having these trainings for 5 to 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
so actually, I don't even have basics of a HL7. So,
Right.
how
Mm-hmm.
equipped would I be after the end of all the trainings? Like, would I at least understand the basic level of HL7 or an intermediate?
Absolutely. It will be from basics to intermediate level. We are going to cover everything. As you can see, we started from the basics today on what happens in the hospital workflow, and from there we started taking a look at HL7 message structure. So this is for people who don't even know about HL7 but have little bit idea about technology and all. Little bit idea, not much. So that they can start their career in HL7 if someone wants to. So we are going to cover everything from basics to intermediate level of implementation. Honestly, most of the integration engines out there who are working on HL7 today wouldn't even, I mean, most of them do not know how to develop an interface from scratch. So that is more than intermediate level of implementation. So that is the level we are going to go through this training from zero. So we have started at zero today, and you will definitely get a very good idea at the end of the training on how, I mean, not just good idea, but you will understand the entire life cycle of an interface. Even if you are given as blank DB and asked you to generate HL7 message, you would be able to do that at the end of the training if you practice well. And again, there is a tag here that you need to practice along through the training once we start Mirth Connect. So Srikanth is asking, I want to extract only medical diagnosis descriptions from EHR report and assign ICD codes. If the report is in CSV, you can do that, Srikanth. If the report is in DB, you can connect to DB, extract the data, only descriptions, and then you can assign the ICD codes. You can also, if you have custom codes, you can also map them to the actual ICD codes. If you know that mapping factor of what is the source code, what is the destination code, you will be able to do that in Mirth Connect. All right. Any other questions from anyone?
I have one more
Hey, Bharat.
question.
Yeah, good.
So does MERS supports only HL7 V2, not F5?
No, it does support Fire. Mirth supports Fire, HL7 V2, CSV, XML, JSON. Even if you have non-formatted raw data, you can play with that as well in Mirth. So Mirth support a lot of data type, data formats.
Okay.
Uh, we are talking explicitly about HL7 V2 because this training was about V2. But in general, from tooling perspective, it does a lot of things apart from what it's dedicated for, where we use not only healthcare data, but also if you have generic JSON objects, generic XML objects, you can use them as well.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Yeah,
Yeah.
Nikita, go ahead.
So every day same timings.
Yes, every day same time from 7 a.m. IST to 8 a.m. IST.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So, will we have the online meetings even on weekends?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I forgot mentioning about that. We'll have a 5 day week. So it will be um, Monday, Tuesday morning Indian time to Saturday morning Indian time, which is Monday evening Eastern time to Friday evening Eastern time. Okay. Any other questions from anyone else?
How this file get generated, this HL7? Like when particular I'm registering a patient.
Mm-hmm.
So at what time we can convert that after the completion of the registration?
Mm-hmm.
It will turn
Immediately. Soon after the
immediately.
message, yes, immediately. Soon after the message is saved, the moment you click on save is the trigger for the patient data to be sent out from PM to EHR. So as soon as that trigger is received, the integration engines will go ahead and pick up that data. It will generate the HL7 message within a second.
So we will write a code. How this file gets generated? That's my question. This is like is a programmatically or some how
We
this
will
it
be,
will.
yeah, we'll be writing this code, or we'll be setting up the entire flow of extracting the data from database, constructing HL7 message, and then generating HL7, constructing the HL7 message and sending it out or writing it to the file can be done through Mirth integration engine. We'll be using JavaScript code. We'll be using SQL to extract the data from database. Then we also have XML that will come when we extract the data from database, and we'll interpret that XML and then generate the HL7 message. We will be seeing that entire cycle on how you can go ahead and do that when we talk about Mirth.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, any other questions from anyone?
Do we have
Okay,
any international certification available? So do you are you providing any like HL7 certified?
we provide completion certification for the training,
Okay.
but if you want to get certified in HL7 V2, then you have to apply for certification from HL7 organization, and you have to write an exam, and after clearing that exam you will be awarded with the certification.
So this course is only for the HL7, not for certification, right?
No, not for certification.
Okay.
I mean, if you go through this course, you can prepare for certification. 70% of the certification syllabus will be done. In the last session, I am going to brief you what all topics you have to prepare through in order to prepare for certification as well. And I will upload some sample questions to the Google Drive so that you can practice through them. But you have to separately pay for certification fee to the HL7 International, and then you have to attend the exam with them so that you can get the certification from them directly.
Thanks.
No problem. Okay. Any other questions from anyone else? All right. So I think we are
Uh,
good to go. Yeah. Yes,
uh,
Hiram.
yeah, not to offend you, Dixon. Like, are you certified with HL7?
I'm not. I'm not.
Okay, okay. Yeah, it's okay, no problem. Yeah, I just want to know
No,
so that
I'm not.
yeah, you
I'm
could
not
lead us. Okay.
certified. Yeah. But many of my trainees are certified. Just to let you know, many of my trainees in HL7 V2 who took my training and people who took my fire training are certified. You can see them in LinkedIn. But yeah, I'm not a fan of certification, so I did not do any certifications.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions from anyone? All right. All right.